This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Welcome to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. I have a wonderful episode for you today, I'm pretty sure. So here's the thing. I'm looking for different ways to introduce people because I just, typically say, oh, I love having my job and I love meeting new people and I expect a great conversation and all that. So I'm really looking for new ways to introduce people and to get you excited about whatever's coming next in this interview. So let me just say what's so about me and today's guest. Today we have Sam Morris, and Sam is quickly, whether he knows it or not, becoming one of my best friends. And this is something that has happened over the last 6 weeks. And Sam and I have had a number of sort of serendipitous crosses in the road where we meet exactly the right person, or we're speaking at exactly the right topic, or we're in a group with exactly the right people. There's been a lot of exactness to our paths over the last couple months. As that, I've known about Sam for a few years, but really over the last few months is when we become a little closer, a little bit more interested in what each of us are about. So today I have the deep honor and the deep privilege to introduce you to Sam Morris. And Sam, it's just a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, Fred, it's a pleasure to be here. What an awesome introduction. Yeah.
Thank you.
I can see that rapidly best friend forming experience as well. That's well said.
Beautiful.
In terms of the synchronicities that you were just speaking to around how we've been connecting recently, it makes me ponder and consider the precision of the unknown. Like when we can get out of our own way and we just see the way that these synchronicities begin to occur when we're not really trying to plan anything. Like you and I haven't really been trying to plan anything, and yet there's this precision to how our interactions have occurred. It's really pretty fascinating.
It really is pretty fascinating. And I love what you're saying, the precision of the unknown, if we're willing to step out of our own way and take a look at it. And, that it's fascinating is even fascinating, don't you think? Like, in a way, we could say what's most fascinating about it, because there's something familiar. It's like, if I get out of my way, it's, oh, that's how this world works. Right. Oh, there's a beat here. Oh, there's a rhythm here. Oh, there's some magic here. Oh, the right person shows up at the right time all the time. Oh, and for me to be fascinated, I have to be coming from some other space that thinks that is outrageous, and that somehow another way I look at the world is the way that it really is. And that's fascinating in its own right,
It is absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. The fact that we find it fascinating and not natural just shows how normally disconnected we are from the beauty and the magnificence of how consciousness wishes to express itself on its own volition without the control of the logical mind.
Beautiful. Well, we're off and running. It's at 3 minutes and 50 seconds, and we've already delved into the purpose of living and the magic of the unknown. So we have another 50 or 60 minutes left. Who knows what we're going to uncover now, Sam? Each and every one of us is really dealing with something, right? No matter whether we're tackling some of the big problems in the world or maybe even the tiny ones, we all face challenges. Now, I've been a psychiatrist for many years, and I've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life. I've worked with more people than I can really count, from various backgrounds, dealing with more issues than you can imagine, of all sizes and shapes. So naturally, over time, I've developed a number of ways to assist others in gaining a new sense of freedom and empowerment. Now, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of those methodologies, and I'm going public, revealing the process and associated mindset that contributed to using this particular method with maximum effectiveness. It's all laid out in my new book called Creative 8: Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. You can pick this book up on Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. And as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'd like to offer you a completely free copy in audiobook format. Just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and download your free audiobook copy of Creative 8 today. I really look forward to hearing about your Creative 8 breakthrough. Now, let's get back to this amazing conversation. Welcome to Humanity. I like to start these interviews, and I think you've already given a taste to our listeners of what your answer is to this. I like to start these interviews with a really simple question. It has the whole question, grammatically correct, has less than 10 letters in it. And so it's an easy question, it seems. I mean, how hard can it be if it only has 9 letters? And it's a question that really leaves us looking at a certain direction or a certain place to start from. So here's what it is, Sam. And if you're not aware of it, sorry to take you off track, but it's pretty easy. And here's what it is. Sam Morris, who are you?
I was actually anticipating the question because I heard your interview with Cass the other day, which was wonderful.
Thank you. A mutual friend now, by the way, so that we'll get, that's really great. Thank you.
You're listening to this and you have not heard the interview with Cass Phelps, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely brilliant. So how I would answer that question is I'm almost like an explorer of who I am not. That's maybe how I would answer that question. An explorer of who I am not.
So say a little bit more. Yeah.
It's fascinating the way in which our minds, and I'm using a generalization here, but I think that it's a valid generalization. Our minds constantly seek to find context and a psychological structure for identification within the material world. And every time we find something, it ends up being a house of cards. It's another ego construct. And so the who I am question, if you keep following it, always creates a false identity. And so ever since I was a kid, I've been curious in who I am not, because I find that when I'm aware from that vantage point, life is a whole lot more interesting than when I try to create some sort of preconceived construct about who I am.
One of the things that sounds like we could get some pay dirt here is, as you say that, and what it has me thinking is it's not the question itself and the discovery, whatever we find for ourselves then becomes a transient house of cards, ego-based transient house of cards that essentially will deconstruct shortly. What I'm really moved by is it's not the question, who are you, that creates that house of cards. It's actually assuming that you found an answer to that question. The question itself is not a house of cards, you see. The question is a question worth exploring.
That's right.
But if you're silly enough to think that you landed somewhere called an answer, that's going to fall apart.
That's absolutely right. And throughout my life, every time I have been that naive or silly enough to attempt to try to find an answer to that, I have suffered the consequences. I find that having that open-ended inquiry into who I am and who I am not without the answer certainly allows for a more dynamic experience of living than if I were to try to attempt to find some sort of concrete answer to that. And I would say that the vast amount of suffering that I have endured in my own life has been caused by trying to get too close to an answer. This allowing life to unfold in its full spectrum of intelligence that is beyond identification.
Mm. So too close to an answer. I really love that. I'm still feeling as we speak here, where did I learn? A question begs an answer, but an answer begs never to be satisfied. It's like, don't ever land on an answer. Always ask questions, don't ever land on an answer, would be like, the mantra here. Like, you can land on answers because, after all, a question begs for why ask a question if there was no answer to it? Unanswerable questions are a paradox, a koan in some level.
Mm-hmm.
So why are we asking questions if there are no answers? And I think what you're really saying, it's not a matter of rejecting the answers. It's a matter of incorporating possible answers and continuing the journey, and getting that if we're going to invest in an answer to the question, who are we? More than likely, that answer will self-destruct fairly quickly.
Yes, indeed. And to bring this from the conceptual and into the experiential, I will use my own
Please do. This is great.
experience to try to elucidate this to anyone who's just kind of like, oh, geez, this is a lot of
Yeah.
cool things. Where are we going here?
Let's bring them back to Earth now, Sam. It's enough of this cosmos hopping. Yeah.
When I just turned 24 years old in 1999, I was in a car accident caused by a drunk driver, which left me paraplegic. And I thank God or the cosmos or whatever you want to call it for my awareness of what we are speaking to. Because to the degree to which I would have tried to hold firm to who I thought I was prior to my injury, that's the degree to which I would have been creating my own unnecessary suffering. Before my injury, I was an able bodied athlete. I had just finished cycling across the US, leading a group of 9 teenagers on a cycling trek across the US. I was a snowboarder, skier, hiker, etc. My whole life revolved around being an outdoor leader. And so when my accident happened, obviously there was a huge amount of trauma that came not only with the loss of my legs, but especially the psychological and emotional adjustment to this new reality. I went from being 6'3" and pretty much everyone that I would encounter, I would be looking down at to look in their eyes. And now I was looking up at everyone from a wheelchair and feeling, having the feeling fragmented in a sense, like a fragmented version of my former self. Now, had I been firmly established in my identity of who I thought that I was and needed to be in order to be me prior to my injury, the suffering from the injury would have been that much greater. But fortunately, I knew not to try to affix any perceived identity structure to myself. And so the process was more fluid as a result, going from able bodied athlete to paraplegic.
You're saying maybe a flexibility or a willingness to consistently trade in who you know yourself to be to fit whatever the new circumstances are became something that really assisted you in being able to manage yourself in life after your accident?
That's right. That's right. I mean, I would not have necessarily been able to put words to it in this effect at the time. And there were certainly times emotionally when I wouldn't have put these types of words to it. But in hindsight, looking back at the experience, I can see that my willingness to be dynamic in my experience of life and not to have any kind of fixed identity about who I felt that I was or needed to be was the key to my survival and sanity. Being able to move with the dynamic expression of life as it was occurring through me without taking it personally.
That's brilliant. And thank goodness, really, thank goodness you weren't cemented into an identity that, would not have been able to flex with what the new demands of life brought your way as a, instant result of a seemingly ridiculous, unfortunate accident. You were able to not only come around on the other side and, live or survive, but maybe even to thrive as a function of it. I've heard you speak to this a number of times, and I don't know exactly where you sit with this, but it seems like a stretch to consider something like this a gift, or to consider something like this, your life's work, or your life's work for all of us. How does it now get incorporated?
It is a stretch to the logical mind because the logical mind, of course, I think believes in a system of checks and balances and karmas, that type of thing, to sort of um, give us a fair experience. And it seems very unfair at the level of logic. But to the transcendent mind, I think it makes perfect sense. And certainly the way in which I have been able to serve the world and create value in the world has been on a probably a much larger level and will continue to be than had I not been through the experience that I went through.
Hmm.
So if I'm looking at it from the perspective not of the logical mind and fairness, but from the perspective of the transcendent, if I'm looking at it from the perspective of soul, which I believe souls are all here in a combined collaboration of human consciousness. I'm firmly rooted in that belief that we are here truly guiding each other into our self-realization of ourselves as the divine. Now that's a whole other level of orientation if I look at it from the level of soul, and if I look at it from the level of what type of sacrifice, what type of suffering could I endure which could catalyze something greater. And I'm always looking at my life through that perspective. What is it that is happening through me and that I'm having the opportunity to experience, which is helping to catalyze something that is greater, that is helping to catalyze wisdom, that is helping to spread something beyond what I might have been able to spread otherwise.
Hmm.
And from that perspective, it makes perfect sense. That brings it from the perspective of why me, the victim mentality, where the logical mind would look at it through the, why me? Of course, the question arises from the notion that there is fairness in the world and that life is a series of checks and balances, and that if we do good, we deserve good, etc., all that kind of stuff. It takes it out of that perspective and now I'm able to look at it from the perspective of, well, why not me?
Hmm.
It actually makes sense in a certain respect. I mean, I had these leadership skills from having done outdoor leadership. I was very fit. I had a very expanded consciousness at the time. So I already was able to be dynamic in my ability to let go of my attachment to being able bodied. So I was able to move with the situation where if I look at it from that more transcendent space, it just makes sense. It's like, of course, it's like, oh yeah, of course it would be me that would go through that experience.
So it goes from why me to why not me to of course it would be me. That's really really amazing, and I totally get it. I love the progression that you're able to speak to. And not all of us have had sort of a paraplegic creating overt external circumstances that has altered the course of events in an instant. Not all of us have had that. However, it could be said that we all have those.
Exactly.
We really do. Like we all have them where we're frozen, where something that we weren't expecting, which is nearly everything after all, but something that we weren't expecting occurs, and we're left having to recreate reality right this very instant, utilizing some degree of new information that got infused into our being, some way of looking at things, a limitation perhaps, or a
Yes,
new gift perhaps. Like yours is like an unfortunate gift.
that's right. That's right. Yes, absolutely. And I want to speak to exactly what you were just saying, because it was when I had that realization initially when I began doing my coaching work. I created a program called Zen Warrior Training, and initially when I started doing that back in 2013, I was going to be working primarily with people who'd had spinal cord injuries to help them to adapt to life post injury. But I quickly realized that what I was addressing wasn't really about the physical. It was about what I was gifted with was an ability to help anyone see where they were creating paralysis in their own lives through some type of, the way that I see it occur in most people is through conformity. There's a what is the word I'm looking for? A very elusive type of influence, unconscious influence that creates conformity over time and creates a static identity that people become comfortable with, even though internally they're actually miserable.
So maybe familiar rather than comfortable, something like, they absorb or become,
Mm-hmm.
they accept, it's their default. So there's something like this.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right. And we see it all around us so much that it's actually the cultural norm. And so we don't even see that the familiarity that most people accept as life is the new normal. That
Hmm.
that what is actually missing is the spark of creative genius that is alive inside of each one of us, that is truly unique and always expressing in a new and dynamic way. And so my inquiry is, what is that? How do we get back to that? How do we restore that function, just in the same way as when I became paraplegic? One of my first objective was, how do I restore the function that I had prior to the injury? And there was no real obvious way. That was why I started to study movement with Emily Conrad, who started Continuum Movement. I know you and Cass talked about Emily
Hmm.
in that interview. She was brilliant. She was the only person in the world at the time, to my knowledge, who had had any success in helping people with paralysis to recover function in their body. And so that became my objective, was I wanted to restore the function in my body. And while that didn't happen, that wasn't what was in God's plan for me. I was able to restore the presence and connection, the connection that's not really the physical connection, but the energetic connection. And when people see me in my wheelchair, I've heard so many people comment that I don't look like I'm disabled at all. I look like I'm just sitting on a chair. And and the reason being is because the energetics have been fully
Hmm.
restored. In fact, the energetics have not only been fully restored, there's actually been an energetic catalyst that has taken me beyond where I was before and into an even more whole expression of myself.
That's okay. I totally get that. And it's completely over the edge brilliant. So the idea that, yeah, not just restored, actually bigger and badder, actually more present, actually more comfortable, actually a broader vibrational contribution.
That's right.
That it's true. Part of me. Oh, here's how. Let me tell you how the progression went in my wild mind. On the one hand, it was like, you don't look disabled. Sounds like, oh, really? Well, I can get self righteous. Like, really? What do you think disabled looks like? What do you think disabled? Why? What about the people that are disabled? What makes them look disabled? I go that way, right? Until I realize, wait a minute, I actually have the same thought about you.
Mm.
Like, oh, I was going to give those people some shit for saying that you don't look disabled, until I get, oh, no, really, I got it that you don't look disabled. And so much so, and I've only met you, at least recently, of course, online several times. You definitely don't look disabled online. You have to remind people. It's like, that is not a guy. You're not, whatever that means, you don't look like you're suffering with a disability. Maybe that's what we're really speaking to, right?
That's right. That's right. Exactly. It's about the full release of the trauma.
The full release of the trauma, exactly.
That's right. Now, the physical body, the matter, can still express as disabled. The way I see it these days is disability is merely an inconvenience. My paraplegia, and which has resulted physically in not only the loss of my legs, but also I've had to deal with multiple pressure ulcers, the loss of my normal sexual function, bladder and bowel control, etc., all that stuff. But to me, that's all just an inconvenience. That's just something to adapt to. It's something to move with, versus something that holds a traumatic kind of energy to it. If it held a traumatic energy, I wouldn't even be able to talk about it, let alone talk about it in the company of the strangers listening to the podcast right now.
Exactly.
There would be too much of a vulnerability there to speak to it. Which speaks to the power of vulnerability, because I haven't always been there too. That was a long, long time in the works, getting to this point that I am in right now, where there is truly enough of a release of the vulnerabilities that I can actually speak to this in a neutral and non-emotional tone.
Sam, let me see if I can get this question to you. I think I'll be able to. I'm not even sure what the back end is, so please bear with me as I design it. There's something here about and we talked about this at least one time. There's something here about the public's impression of a man like you, odd as you are. I mean, you're probably odd long before your accident, but that's a different conversation we'll have another day. And then you have your accident, and then you have everything you have, so that now you're speaking into a language that we can all relate to at some level. But in another level, you can be held out as an icon. There is an impulse to treat you as a different, someone who's way different, someone who's an icon, someone who is a hero, and not to take away from any aspect of iconic, heroic, personhood that you really are. I'm going beyond that. In some ways, to separate ourselves from, oh my goodness, Sam is a special, spectacular, different than me human being. You see, it's easy to go there, to hold you out there as sort of like nothing like me, but my God, are you interesting and a spectacle? Or, yeah, a guy like that. And as opposed to what I think you really are a stand for, which is to see that we are all you.
That's right.
And you are us.
That is correct. That is absolutely, that is exactly, you just hit the nail on the head. That is exactly my intention. My intention has never been to be iconic or heroic in any way, shape, or form. And even the notion of it makes me a little uncomfortable, because it would be heading into the wrong pathway for my own consciousness, my hope, my intention is to normalize things that are not normalized in this culture and that I feel need to be normalized in order for us to do some very deep healing. And particularly when I just spoke about the sexual function thing, you know,
Yeah.
when I actually just told my mother about a week ago that I spoke openly about that, and that I'd spoken openly about that multiple times, and probably thousands of people listening to podcasts have heard me speak to it. And she was rather shocked. She thought, "Oh my God, Sam, what? How could you?" Basically, I basically said, "How could I not?" I mean, this is so important because, for me, all I got through the loss, through the impotence that I experienced from my spinal cord injury was a preview of what we're all going to experience at some point, which is the loss of that which we hold dearly as something that is essential for our sense of self. If you think about the way in which most men identify their self-esteem hinges upon their ability to achieve an erection, how big that erection is, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You take that away from them, suddenly they don't have the type of self-esteem that they had before. Now, I think that's tragic.
Yeah.
I think that is what a arbitrary marker of self-worth and self-esteem. Completely arbitrary. And to whatever degree one is attached to that, it's where that is creating an unconscious stifling of one's own divinity, one's own beauty, one's own power. And so, I want to normalize this type of conversation, not so that I can stand out as someone special, but so that everyone can start to see themselves in me and see, oh my gosh, yeah, I do that. If other men can do that and go, oh yeah, I do that. I tie my sense of self-worth to my ability to achieve an erection and how long I can hold up, having sex, etc. Blah 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 blah. I mean, ironically, the interesting thing is, since losing that function, my ability to pleasure a woman has been far, far greater than it ever was before.
This isn't a prescription or a recommendation by any stretch.
Or a recommendation, but I do think that without that being I think that in a certain respect, that is a hindrance to a lot of people actually being able to fully pleasure a woman because of that energetic association between the manliness and the hardness, the erectness, etc. I think that it's actually it takes people away from their presence oftentimes, versus bringing them into a deeper, more intimate experience.
Again, super brilliant and certainly hitting me. I noticed that, it's the same kind of thing. Yep, that's what they do, Sam. That's what they do. It's that's what I do. It's like, oh, yep, Sam, that's what people do. That's what people do. I can see it from your perspective. Oh, wow, that's me. I do that. And, it's like, oh, wow, I have an attachment to that. Yeah, the last thing I want is to have my sexuality or my sexual function as I see it, my erection, my hardness, my capacity to be hard, my sexual, intercourse experience be stolen from me.
Right.
Like, well, then who I would be.
Right.
And really getting, well, who I would be is who I would be. And that this is and no less of a man, and theoretically, or even as you say, perhaps actually a greater man. Like that like amazing. It might not even be like I could survive. We're back to that thing. Like I could survive. And in fact, no, I can survive at even a higher vibrational contributional level.
That's been my experience.
And amazing.
That's been my experience.
Yeah. So, because it's really just, it is arbitrary. It's just completely an arbitrary measure. It's one that was chosen for the prevailing conversation.
That's
It
right.
might as well be how fast can you run the 50-yard dash, and then measuring your manhood on
That's
that.
right. That's right.
Or how can you say the alphabet backwards and measuring your your value on
That's
that.
right. That's right. And when our culture creates its own arbitrary measurements of what deems one worthy or confident or whatever, it is the most insulting thing to the divine within us. And here we do it in so many different ways. I mean, you think of the way in which people do this with money all the time. If I have
Hmm. Sure.
an X number of dollars in my bank account, then I can associate myself with a certain class of society, and then I'll identify with that class. Blah 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 blah. This is it gets back to what the Buddha was really teaching about non-attachment. Is even back thousands of years ago, the same thing was occurring. People were attaching themselves to arbitrary measurements of success to either identify as confident and worthy individuals or not. And those attachments were what was creating their suffering. And
Hmm.
when he was teaching non-attachment, this is exactly what he was talking about.
It goes with this idea of questions, yes, answers, no. It goes, if you see the Buddha on the road, it goes to that. It goes to, yeah, search all you want, but please don't find.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Mm-hmm.
it literally is in the journey for which life is developing, and not in the destination. Now, all these things, they have a little bit of mm, a ring of familiarity, of lingo, colloquialism. It's not what I'm referring to in our
Mm-hmm.
conversation. What I'm referring to is that when I get attached, I have a big bank account, or I have a big organ, or I have this or that, and therefore I am increased in my value, and therefore other people who don't have this are decreased in in my value system. The amount of trouble that gets created from landing on an answer to this is like a tragic, extraordinary impact on humanity. Like,
Yes.
that we attach these values to these arbitrary.
Yes. It turns all of life into a arbitrary equation. And what's more tragic than that? I
Yeah,
mean, to the
it
degree to
it
which we
is.
are doing that inside of our own minds is the degree to which we are cut off from all of the rest of the intelligence of life.
Okay. So again, now we've upgraded to this, and we're really looking at, to the degree to which we do that is the degree that we cut ourselves off from all the other intelligence, or even all the divine intelligence in the world. Now, what is it besides conversation that has one sort of agree or be willing to take the journey, or to continue on a journey that's here anyways, and to discard as soon as possible any of the seductive answers that might be put out in front of us to satisfy the burning questions we have? How does one actually get that done day to day, or does one get that done every day? And what's your feeling as a coach, or just as as where you are in your world now? Is there a way to optimize my time here to stay in the question and not fall for the shiny object of an answer?
That's such a great question. I think that historically, that these types of breakthroughs and awareness that we are speaking to have tended to be a byproduct of necessity, where
Hmm.
someone's suffering has been so severe that they give up on trying to do it the way that they thought they were going to do it, and they have to surrender, and they have to keep surrendering over and over and over again, day in and day out. because the alternative is more than they can tolerate. And I hate seeing that, because I want to, I mean, I don't know if this is just the sort of idealist of me, but I would ultimately like to see a pathway to this type of awareness that doesn't require the level of friction that one has to experience to be able to break free of the cultural norms of identification. And I would say that I got a big assist in my own life through my early use of psychedelics. That was a big, big assist for me, because I was able to see in very plain, clear sight. I was able to perceive, starting from the age of 17, when I first took my first hit of LSD, I was able to see the way in which conformity and attachment was causing suffering in the world. It became so clear to me. Here I thought that I was getting into, maybe seeing some moving colors and hallucinations and, sounds and synesthesia and stuff like that, thinking, oh, that sounds really cool. And the next thing I know, I was having these, Buddha-like experiences of, seeing the nature of suffering on the planet in a way in which it's self-created through the unconscious, through the collective unconscious. It was a lot more than I had thought that I was going to get into, but that those early years of my use of psychedelics have informed every part of my life since then. And so I do believe that they are a strong catalyst for breaking free of cultural norms and experiencing the self from that space of open inquiry.
First of all, thank you for sharing that. Quite beautiful. And you went in it so that the walls would breathe, or so you could have a fun time, or you could watch the colors, or, I remember in one mescaline trip in high school for me, I had posters of Larry Zonka and none other than Jimi Hendrix, to be honest. And you and I can laugh about that. But Larry Zonka and Jimi Hendrix in my bedroom. And I was there in my bedroom tripping, and Zonka came out of the poster to go watch Hendrix play, and I was like, "Oh, that's great." And I just remember that as being, "Oh, this is a fun deal." And I had a cat that was up in the window, and it was like an etched memory. And then all of a sudden, or pretty much all of a sudden, all of life was being thrown out on the table for me to reconstruct a new way of looking at sources of suffering, a new way to look at just absurdities and ludicrous methodologies that I had been using up until that time to call myself me. And, really getting a peek at what is indeed, seemingly anyways, a much higher sense of what it is to be closer, or in fact with the divine, so that I could proceed through life having tasted that. Because after all, when the psychedelic or the hallucinogen or the medication or the drug or whatever you want to call it, they say wears off, when it wears off, then I got to come back to this astral plane and make sense of it. Having seen and had experiences with the psychedelics forever, really, from that moment, forever alters the course of life. And and I would say in a good way, but I got it. If you've never done psychedelics and you don't want to do them, then please don't do them. You shouldn't do them unless you want to, and then you should. That's the way I always tell people. You definitely should not do psychedelics. And don't.
Don't
unless
do
you
it
want to,
because you think you should or you're supposed to or whatever.
Exactly. Exactly. But if you really are ready to do them, by all means do them. By all means, hurry up and do them. But no, you probably shouldn't do them if you don't want to. And it's anyways.
If you don't want to, then let those of us who are willing to do them and come back with some wisdom that we will try to convey in words through other means. There's always breath work. Breath work can be incredibly transformative when taught correctly. And so that is a much more reliably safe way to approach altered states of consciousness. And so, it doesn't, I don't think it takes everyone using psychedelics. Let those of us who wish to explore our consciousness go ahead and do so. And we will try to interpret what we see and come back. And, not everyone has to go to the moon. It only took a few people to go to the moon and take those pictures of Earth, which changed everything in terms of how people perceive the planet. And so, it only takes, I think, in a similar vein, it only takes a relatively small minority of people to have psychedelic experiences and to be able to harness the awareness, not only harness it, but learn how to convey it and integrate it in a way that can be of use.
Yes.
And that's a big challenge, because the experience is so ineffable, and yet at the same time, so powerful. That integration is very challenging. And I remember, those times coming off of acid or mushrooms or whatever. Suddenly, the normal, familiar reality would begin to reconstruct. And I would think, oh, no. I'm losing it. I had this thing. There was this awareness that was so profound, that was so incredibly important to be able to experience. And now it's slipping away from me as reality reconstructs. But, the more that I have, found other means by which to enter into that non-dual realm through breath work, meditation, etc., the more I can communicate and embody that awareness in my day-to-day life.
Well, Sam, you're immensely gifted at putting things in words in the language that resides with us here on this, flat plane. And there's, I really can hear, and I know my listeners share this, your heart and your ability to describe your journeys using experiences that otherwise don't have words waiting for you. They don't have the prevailing conversation waiting for you. They're not, to say, walls breathe. Well, it is kind of fun when the walls breathe. It's, and that's not what we're talking about. And there's something about the geometrics. There's something about the reconstitution. There's something about where you get to be when, instead of an astronaut, kind of a psychonaut, you get to be returning back from that moon and describing, but not only describing, sharing, I would say, what you learned. We use the word see, what you saw, but it isn't really seeing with your eyes.
Right.
It's seeing experientially. And there's an opportunity for you, and I just hear this being perhaps your superpower, to bring this back to, we'll say, Earth, or this astral plane, or reality, or whatever you want to call it, this where we're presently sharing this collective consciousness on the flat plane. You have a real ability to bring that, to bring life, or to bring through your words and your presence, to bring an education or a teaching.
I really appreciate you saying that, Fred. First of all, that is it's very, very validating to me to hear you say that, and to hear someone who, whose opinion and perspective I respect as much as yours, which is huge. I think that's really my life's mission, is to to be a sort of a transcriber of of these expanded state of awareness, to bring that in to our more sort of familiar reality, which most of us are present to, because it's so important. I knew from the moment I first had my first psychedelic experience and went, holy smokes. I mean, we are living in such a limited perspective on what it means to be human most of the time. We are so unconscious. And I don't mean that in any kind of condescending or patronizing way. It's just true. I mean, it's not.
Right.
I almost hate using that term because it can to the uninitiated, even using the word uninitiated, it can come off sounding condescending or patronizing, and I so don't want that to be the case.
Yeah.
It's simply that there is a whole other plenum of awareness that is ready to be connected to. And, within that space, when you're in that space, when you have access to it and you're firmly rooted in that space, the whole notion that we would ever be at war with each other, or that we would have conflict over different belief systems, or that we would be using up the Earth's resources and spoiling the planet, it seems ridiculous that these would be motivators. I mean, it seems absolutely absurd when you're in that space. You just can't relate to it whatsoever. I mean, even a belief seems absurd. Why would I bother having a belief? Who cares about beliefs? Who gives a shit about beliefs? What is a belief anyway? It's just nothing but a synaptic connection in the brain. Who gives a shit?
Right. Well, thanks for really right after the acknowledgement I gave you for giving us another example of you being exactly that. Like, I just want to say you're able to illuminate an experience that probably many of our listeners have never actualized in their own world in such a way to get that. Yes, we have. Yeah, we can relate to that. That's what's happening to us every day. This is absurd. It's absurd that I say what I know and what I believe and then act on it in ways to destruct the planet or to ruin relationships or to cause war or to, it's like beyond absurd. And yeah, I can justify it with my reasons and all that, but there's something in what you're saying, this notion of the essence of the divine, the willingness or even eagerness or even commitment that we all have as a functional collective body to bring peace, here, like to actually bring peace. Like we all really seems like that's real interesting to being human. Like the average humans would like that.
Yeah, and in a normal, in a familiar construct of reality, that notion of peace on Earth might seem completely naive or utopian, and so easily dismissible, because it feels so far off from how human beings have always operated, at least for the recorded history. But when you are having that, for lack of a better term, transcendent experience, you can see, we are living the abnormal. We're not actually living the naive. It's actually not naive at all. Like the way that we are in this world right now is actually abnormal. It's not, we are operating under a very strange spell which has us disconnected from who we really are. And it's that spell that most people take for granted and don't realize that they are living under. And I'm not saying it's a spell of a particular belief system. It's a spell of any belief system.
Any belief system. It's a spell of the believing in a belief system, pretty much. Yeah.
Exactly.
Sam, what kind of people do you coach? First of all, how would someone who's interested in you find you? But secondly, like, who ends up gravitating to you, and what is your work as Zen Warrior? What kind of things are you doing?
Most of the people who have traditionally gravitated towards me are folks who are, a lot of them are in their 50s, and they're ready to examine their lives through a new perspective. Their spark has been diminished, and they can acknowledge that, and they can see that I see who they really are. And when they can see that I see who they really are, and I can hold space for them to rediscover that, then what we do is essentially we are unwinding a lot of unconscious patterns of thinking that have prevented them from fully embodying the truth of their divine, unique presence. And to me, presence is our greatest gift, our greatest asset, and that which needs to be focused on primarily. And everything from there is secondary. A lot of coaches focus primarily on goals and that type of thing. I think goals are meaningless without connecting to the truth of your unique genius and who you really are. Now, from there, then you can go ahead and design all the goals you want, because they'll be in alignment with you expressing as you, and you bringing the unique value that you have to offer through to the world. I'm moving primarily into men's work in this coming year and probably beyond as well. And the focus is going to be on soul confidence, which is a different type of confidence than the type of confidence that comes from, say, mastering a subject and then being able to talk to that subject. It's a confidence that is impenetrable, that doesn't come and go. It's the confidence of being fully grounded in the presence of you. And being able to be in the unknown and stand confidently in that space and own the value of your presence, independent of what you know. And so that's really the focus now. And how I approach that, the how is through verbal coaching, meditation practices, and breathwork practices. That anything that can, using meditation and breathwork practices to change the consciousness so that one can have a broader, more expanded experience of themselves and embody that, because we can speak to it conceptually all day. And as long as it is going through the mind of logic, see, this is a problem that I see a lot. And it has to do with people trying to better themselves. And I've done it myself. The attempt to better oneself coming from the perception that there's something off or wrong with how you already are. And what that does is it simply creates a modification of the dysfunction versus letting go of the dysfunction altogether. So that's a very fine line, because when someone seeks coaching, essentially what they are trying to do is better themselves.
Most of the time.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. That's the whole investment. And there's plenty of coaches out there who will prey on your insecurities to make you think that after working with them, you will achieve some transformational outcome that will have you feeling like a whole other person. And that's a slippery slope, and it's a very manipulative, and it may not be intentionally manipulative on the coach's end. They might think, well, this is what I have to offer, and this is a valuable thing to do. And in a certain respect, fine, that's okay. But it doesn't oftentimes get at the underlying dysfunction, which is that the ego still hasn't been fully addressed. And what I am attempting to do with everyone that I work with. And I say attempting because, I have to be humble about this. I can only do so much. It takes a lot on the part of the person who is engaging with me to make these transformations. But it's a transformation into the now. It's really around dissolving that ego barrier that even thinks that there's something better to do or that there's a better person to become.
Right. That this isn't perfect.
This isn't
Exactly.
perfect. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
That this isn't the perfect divine expression of exactly what wants to happen through them right now,
Right
already.
now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that's a big job. And so I take that job very seriously of unwinding anything that is preventing that individual from experiencing themselves as a perfect expression of themselves in the now moment. And that takes a lot of deconditioning of the ego mind that thinks that there's something better to get to. That's the biggest trap of all, is thinking that there's something better to get to. And I refuse to play into that as a coach. Now, one could argue that undermines my marketing ability, and I don't give a shit because I don't care to market bullshit. I want to, market the real thing, which is you are perfect in your divine expression in this moment, and let's get there.
Well, I am going to go out on a limb here and say that the marketing ploy that you just used, which is one from a sheer sense, at least to the best of your ability, of just authentically taking on what's so, in the notion that this is a expression of the perfection, the divine perfection of life as it is right now, with better not even being possible, let alone something to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Like really getting that, and getting that that's where you're coaching from. And you don't, maybe that diminishes your demographic population who might consider hiring you. I would say quite the opposite is true. Exactly. And then our listeners, there's going to be some people who are like, I want to follow Mr. Morris. I want to follow Sam. I want to call him and maybe even get coached, or I want to learn from him, or I want to work with him. How would someone go ahead and do that?
Well, I appreciate you saying that. And for those of you who do, go to my website, zenwarriortraining.com.
It's zenwarriortraining.com, yes?
That's correct.
And Sam, is there a room if someone, like, are you looking for clients, or is it more to, really get an idea of what you've been up to and what you're going to be up to?
Well, I work with a select few individuals privately at any given time. So if this is something that you feel called to do privately, then let me know. And also, if you feel called to have me develop other types of programs, group programs, etc., I'm always open to suggestions. So you can email me at sam@zenwarriortraining.com. Reach out to me, give me your suggestion, tell me what you're looking for.
Really great. Awesome. Sam, it really has been great, and it's always great. And Sam and I are up to a couple different side hustle projects that are so exciting that I can't wait to really unfurl on this show sometime not so long into the future. And as you can see, we have an accelerated relationship that's just moving towards best friend. It's like so interesting how life works.
It really is that precision of the intelligence of life is extraordinary.
It is. It makes you just want to laugh like when Zonko went to Hendrix. Laugh. It's really.
I can't believe I haven't even seen you in person and given you a big hug yet. Isn't that amazing that we've only been connecting over Zoom? And it's incredible.
It is. Folks, this has been Sam Morris, and you see why. You see why A, I love this job. B, why I love this man. C, we get to share ourselves with you, and also really get to this question. It all comes out to, or it all comes from this question of who are you, or maybe even what now becomes, I guess, a 6-letter question is, who am I? And so I invite you to take a peek at that. You've heard me, and maybe you have your ideas or thoughts about who I am. And you've heard Sam today, and you have thoughts or idea about who he is. And then there's an opportunity for you to really take a look at the divine perfection that's sitting right there with you, right through everything. And this is really what Welcome to Humanity is about, really taking a look at what's already here and seeing it as part of humanity. And so, listeners, it really deeply moves me that you've been able to find me, find this interview, stay until this point in the conversation, and get whatever you've gotten. So it's really a pleasure for me. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Sam, thank you so much for joining us and making it such a rich, beautiful, explorative conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. And for those of you still listening, I admire your resilience for making it through such a deep conversation.
Yeah, no kidding. Thank you for being there for that too. And I love you, Sam. I love you, folks. And we will catch you on the backside. Again, Sam, deep gratitude for you being here. Thank you so much.
Love you too, Fred. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye for now, everybody.
Hey, welcome to Humanity Family. It's Ryan Levesque here, co-producer of the show. I truly hope you enjoyed Dr. Fred's in-depth conversation with Sam Morris today. If you did, and if the conversations we share each week are making a difference for you, could you please take just a moment to leave a rating and a short review on Apple Podcasts? Your enthusiastic review helps new listeners discover the show. Your support here really does make a difference. I'd also like to invite you to reach out to a friend or two who would appreciate today's episode. Maybe shoot them a quick text or email, or maybe pick up the phone and invite them to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast so they can be enriched from the discovery of amazing ideas and insights each week. As always, you can find past episodes along with the complete show notes and links at welcometohumanity.net/podcast. If you'd like to explore how working one-on-one with Dr. Fred can help you break through whatever challenges you might be facing with your mental health or well-being, leading to new levels of freedom and vitality, I invite you to reach out to us directly by emailing Dr. Fred at welcometohumanity.net. That's DRFRED at welcometohumanity.net. Thanks so much for listening, and keep an ear out for another captivating conversation next week. Have a beautiful day, a beautiful week, and indeed, a beautiful life. Welcome to Humanity.